Well, today we're going to be hearing "Run, Forrest, Run."
Really?
No, well, not really.
I was going to say.
But Paul challenges us to run.
Okay. And he also challenges us to find common ground with other people. So that's what we're talking about today. He's Chris, I'm Jeff, and we're the Bible guys.
So, Jeff, I thought you were going to speak first. We are going to do a segment where we are going to have some fun, and we're going to do a draft.
Okay, I love drafts.
And last time, we drafted, I think, our favorite candy. Mm-hmm. We drafted before, like favorite cities to visit.
Favorite drive-thrus.
Favorite drive-thrus. And so today we're going to be drafting our favorite drinks.
Okay.
And these are non-alcoholic drinks, right? Obviously, for us today. And we are going to do rock, paper, scissors to see who goes first.
Okay, here we go.
So
rock,
1, 2,
paper,
3,
scissors.
shoot. Ready? 1, 2, 3, shoot. Oh, it's me.
Chris gets to draft first.
I did rock. He did scissors. So I'm going to go with something a little complex, and I'm going to say specifically IBC root beer with vanilla ice cream for a root beer float.
Ooh.
So I'm sort of.
That's top of the line. That's draft choice number 1.
I think so.
Wow.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, obviously, I don't do it often because it's not very good for you.
Yeah.
But in terms of like favorite drinks of all time, I think maybe so.
Yeah. Okay. So the drink I drink the most would be Coke Zero. So I'm just going to take that right off the top because I don't want you to steal it from me later.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Well, see, I only drink that out of necessity.
Yeah.
If I were to drink something that was like for my taste buds, I only drink Coke Zero because I have to.
Oh, really? I drink it because I like it.
Well, I've learned to like it.
Yeah. Hey, do you remember coming out of the bush in Kenya after spending like 10 days or something, and you finally get to where there's like an ice cold Coca-Cola? Man,
yeah, it's the best thing in the world.
Bring me 7 of them, right? As a matter of fact, we showed up one time at a camp and they had them cold Cokes, and I was like, "Bring me 5." And the guy was what? And he brought me 1, and I said, "Where's the other ones?" He said, "Were you serious?" I said, "Yes. Bring me all the Cokes."
That's so funny.
It was because they had Coke Zeros. Yeah.
That's funny. Okay. So
here's your second one.
The second drink that I would go with is probably, oh, goodness gracious. I would say orange juice.
Orange juice?
I love orange juice.
Wow. I did not expect that one.
Yeah, no, I absolutely love orange juice.
Yeah.
But again, I don't drink it as often as I should or want to. Because of the sugar.
It's too much sugar. Yeah. That's a good one. That was a good choice. I was going to also call root beer, but it's what kind of root beer do I like? Stewart's cold brewed draft root beer.
Wow.
This is the best root beer in the world. So that's what I would do.
All right. Mm-hmm. So
that's my number 2. We both have a root beer.
Number 2 is a root beer.
Okay.
And then my number 3 would have to be, it would probably help if I actually thought this through before. This is going to be a funny one that nobody's going to agree with, but okay, it's milk.
Milk?
So when I was a kid, I would drink a gallon of milk a day.
Yeah, wow.
I would just drink milk. It was nothing but milk. And the older I got, the more that I sort of went away from dairy. And then my wife got me hooked on like sort of skim milk. And then I actually prefer skim milk now as opposed to,
You're hooked on it? She got you hooked on skim milk?
I don't drink milk anymore.
Oh, okay.
But it's one of my favorite things.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, it used to be.
Wow. Okay, so believe it or not, I was going to say chocolate milk.
Oh, chocolate milk.
Yeah. So I was going to say that. But since you said milk, let me pick another one. The other drink I drink the most would be peach Perrier.
Wow.
Yeah.
I hate that stuff.
I love it.
Yeah.
I love
sparkling. Your fridge is full of it.
Water. Yeah. I love sparkling water. Peach Perrier would be my favorite, probably.
Son of a gun.
Yeah.
Oh, cool. Well, who knew? The depths of Chris and Jeff.
Go. How sophisticated.
And our drink.
Milk and root beer. That's
right. Milk and root beer and sparkling water.
Yeah. I'm sure that was a riveting segment. That's 4 minutes these people are never getting back.
That's exactly true. Okay. The only reason why anybody would care about that is if they liked us.
Yes, that's right.
As people. Right. Not just like other than that, you're like
the kind of person who wears our faces on their sweatshirts and they got a little bobblehead of us on that shelf.
Because Lord knows we have plenty of those.
Tons of those.
Yeah.
Yep.
As in 0.
Our moms.
Right. Our moms.
Yep. Okay, so we are continuing in 1 Corinthians chapter 9, and Paul pivots just a little bit. So yesterday was kind of his, hey, follow me because I'm an apostle and you can trust me, change lives are important, that kind of thing. Well, now we're going to pick up in verse 17, and he says, if I were doing this in my own initiative, I would deserve payment, but I have no choice, for God has given me this sacred trust. What then is my pay? It's the opportunity to preach the good news without charging anyone. That's why I never demand my rights when I preach the good news. Even though I'm a free man with no master, I've become a slave to all people to bring many to Christ. When I was with the Jews, I lived like a Jew to bring the Jews to Christ. When I was with those who follow the Jewish law, I too lived under that law. Even though I am not subject to the law, I did this so I could bring to Christ those who were under the law. When I'm with the Gentiles who do not follow the Jewish law, I too live apart from that law, so I can bring them to Christ. But I do not ignore the law of God, I obey the law of Christ. When I am with those who are weak, I share their weaknesses. For I want to bring the weak to Christ. Yes, I try to find common ground with everyone, doing everything I can to save some. I do everything to spread the good news and share in its blessings. Don't you realize that in a race, everyone runs, but only one person gets the prize? So run to win. All athletes are disciplined in their training. They do it to win a prize that will fade away, but we do it for an eternal prize. So I run with purpose in every step. I'm not just shadow boxing. I discipline my body like an athlete, training it to do what it should. Otherwise, I fear that after preaching to others, I myself might be disqualified.
Yeah, that's it.
That's it.
Yeah, and so there's a lot here, and to be honest, Paul has sort of struck upon. Well, I mean, Paul didn't strike upon it. We have struck upon the passage that a lot of pastors find motivation in ministry. I mean, think about like everything that motivates you as a pastor. So you surrender to full-time vocational ministry, and the one thing that that sort of presses you on is that here's Paul. He's doing whatever he can. He says, I've become all things to all people. So in order by all means, I may win some. Right. He's doing everything he can. Mm-hmm. So I think of venues like Celebrate Recovery. If you don't know what that is, that's like a ministry that meets in a lot of churches where people who are addicted or have hurts or habits or hang-ups. Yeah. And we have that at Heritage.
It's a Bible-based recovery program.
A Bible-based recovery program, right. Yeah. And what you do is you identify with people's weaknesses. And so people who get involved in that ministry, ultimately, they want to help people, get free from their addictions. But ultimately, the goal would be so that they could learn to depend on the freedom in Christ and and the power of God that comes, with the freedom that comes with that. So I think of venues like that. I think of like, Jeremiah Roy, who's a pastor in the area. He's a workout fiend, and Chris May, who is at Heritage, he's a workout fiend, right? Yeah. Uh-huh. What does he do? Is he uses that ministry ultimately to leverage his influence, to bring others to Christ, right? And so, to the weak, he became weak. To the strong, he became strong. To the Jewish, he acted like a Jew, right? And he does whatever he can so that ultimately lives being changed.
Yeah, apostolic giftings tend to help people. God gives them this ability to adapt to different cultural elements. The principle here, though, is you're probably not going to lead people who are different from you to Christ as often as you'll lead people who are similar to you in Christ, right? So Paul was saying, as an apostle, God had given him this gift. He could adapt to situations without sinning. He wasn't sinning. He wasn't just like, I'm going to go out to the nightclubs because everybody's going to nightclubs and live a wicked life or whatever. He's saying, I will do the things that are necessary within their culture to be able to reach them within their culture. But he said, I don't sin against the law of Christ on that. I was thinking about that from the perspective of like Hudson Taylor was one of the first missionaries from the West that went to the Far East. And when he got there, other missionaries had tried, but didn't have really any impact. Well, the reason was, they're coming from, Edwardian Britain or Victorian Britain at the time, and they'd come in their suits and their herringbones and their top hats and their fancy shoes and all kind of stuff. And in the Far East, the people look at them and think they're crazy. Hudson Taylor comes in and he trades in all of his British clothes and his British shoes with buckles and all that kind of stuff. And instead he's wearing the silks that they wear. And instead of having buttons like we would use buttons, he'd use the toggles on the shirts, right? He grew his hair to be like their hair. He ate the food that they ate. He slept on bamboo mats like they slept on bamboo mats. He didn't try to export his culture into their world and then try to reach them. Instead, he came into their world and became like them. And then they respected him, saying, okay, you're living life like we do. And I think that's a lot of what Paul's trying to say there.
Yeah, and I think that sometimes church services, some church services, if they really have a focus on reaching those people who don't go to church, if your goal is to bring in those who are far from God, who have no church culture, in fact, even people that, quite frankly, even hate church, right? Because they grew up with this church background that they just don't like at all. If they're invited and they walk in through the door, it's okay to have a little bit of culture and to take culture and sort of use the culture to point it toward God, which is sometimes why we play like movie clips, right? Like we were just planning a service and we were talking about betrayal. In fact, it's our January series coming up. It's when I feel betrayed. Where is God when I feel betrayed?
Right.
And we had a thought. We thought, man, there are so many clips of a movie where there's betrayal, right?
Yeah.
So why not just like put a montage of clips together? Because I want to leverage culture so that people walk in and they go, man, I identify with that.
Yeah.
Right. And there's nothing wrong with
Which
that.
is like Paul, when, we already read it, where Paul's at the Areopagus and he goes, they have a stand for an idol and it says the unknown God. There is no idol on it. They're just saying, hey, there's an unknown God. And he did not say, shame on you.
Right.
Instead, he took that stand that said to the unknown God, said, let me tell you about the God you don't know.
Right.
Right? That was in their culture. And so that's where he began.
That's right.
Was where they were at. So he wasn't teaching them to do the wrong thing or to embrace sinful principles. What he did is he started where they were and brought them to Jesus.
That's
and that's what
right.
you're talking about. That's what
exactly
he's talking about here, too.
Yeah, so I love that. I love that. So it really is a motivation. So one of my primary jobs is to be a part of creating weekend services, and we do it for that person walking in through the door.
Yeah.
And so there are a lot of Christians who may not understand how does that belong in a weekend service? How in the world, like where does that belong? Well, it doesn't belong for you. It belongs for that person. We're trying to make a connection a lot of times.
Yeah.
And then also it goes directly from that idea into the next idea, which is like anybody who's a competitive person, anybody who needs motivation.
Before we get in that, I have one more thing to say about this, all things first. I think we have another minute or two. I wanted to say, because I love where you're going, and then we're going to want to sit there for a minute. He says, in verse 23, in verse 22, he said, I try to find common ground with everyone, doing everything I can to save some. I think this is one of the best arguments for being a Renaissance man or a Renaissance woman. One of the great things about Da Vinci, he understood physics and he understood art and he understood, right? He had this very broad experience and worldview. I think it takes a certain amount of curiosity of the world around you to help you be well-rounded where you can have a meaningful conversation with anybody wherever they're at. Instead of expecting everybody to come over, you have one thing you do. The only thing I do, I am obsessed about collecting stamps. Right. It's the only thing I can think of. Well,
by the way, I've never met a stamp collector in my entire life.
Yeah, well, I've known a few. But if you have this very narrow thing that hardly anybody's a part of, and then you have a very narrow group of people to be able to communicate with.
Right.
But if you appreciate travel and you appreciate physics and you learn a little bit about finance and you enjoy food and you enjoy music and you enjoy movies and you enjoy all these things, and not only that, but you've become a student of many, many things, you have more people that you can have meaningful conversations with. And he said, I'm just looking for common ground. He said, I'm not trying to be an expert at everything. Right. I just want to be able to effectively engage wherever people are. And so read broadly, listen broadly, pay attention broadly to many of the things that are in the world, and you'll have way more opportunity to share the gospel with people.
Yeah, I agree with that completely. Completely. Because somebody who's only spiritually minded, if they start there, it's going to be a little bit less effective than if I were to connect with you as a human. If you have no interest in God whatsoever,
right.
But if I find a common ground with you, and all of a sudden you're like, hey, this person, we have common ground. We're alike in some way.
Right.
then all of a sudden your leverage and your influence and your relationship becomes stronger.
Right.
And then the words are, have more weight.
Right.
Right.
So Paul, he's going all kinds of places, meeting all kinds of people. Now, the flip side of that, if you are that stamp collector and you have that very narrow expertise,
Right.
then understand that God has given you a niche group of people to go after, and that is your specialty. So there's a lot of advantage to being a specialist and being a world-class expert at what you do, right? That's very narrow, and then that gives you a narrow group of people to go after that nobody else is going to reach,
Right.
right? So my goal would be to be as broad as possible to share the gospel with as many people as possible.
Yeah.
If God has given you the flip side, the different personality, then understand God has you on that path to reach those specific people. So then leverage that for the gospel.
Kevin Valentine is a good friend of mine. He's a pastor in Orlando, Florida. And I used to work with him on staff. And did you know at one time, and still today he's close, but at one time he was the number one amputee golfer in the world.
Wow.
So he actually, on.
He lost a leg in an accident, right?
He lost the leg on I-75 right here in our town, and so he has he's a prosthetic, and so he was a golfer beforehand, and so he sort of learned to adjust, and he was the number one amputee golfer, and there's, believe it or not, a category. There's a pretty large category.
Yeah.
So they used to fly him to Sweden, and they used to fly him like everywhere just to play golf.
Wow.
Well, here's what he learned. Is that through our connection, through Dave Wilson, used to be an NFL chaplain, which is a good buddy of ours that worked on staff as well. And so he used to get me and Kevin to speak at a lot of the NFL teams for chapel. Well, here's what Kevin learned. He learned that because he was the number one golfer in the world in his field,
Right.
that a lot of the NFL athletes would listen to anything Kevin had to say.
Right.
And they would say, "What? Can you give me golfing lessons?"
Yeah.
And he would golf. He would go there to speak to them, football players.
Right.
But he would tell them the story, and then immediately they would say, "Can we golf together?"
Because of common ground.
And so he said he led more NFL athletes to Christ, trying to teach them how to golf.
Yeah.
Isn't that amazing?
Yeah, that's fantastic.
Because he's using it.
Yep. I think that's what we're talking about.
Yeah, that's right.
So if you're an expert at something, then use that to lead people to Jesus.
Right.
If you are like me, I tend to be a broad thinker, and I get obsessed about weird things. One time in January, I came across, I fell in love with tea. I love tea. And one time in the month of January, I read 1,000 pages on tea.
Yeah.
Right. And I can talk to anybody about tea for 20 minutes, 30 minutes. I'm not an expert, but I read a bunch about it and I know about it. I like it.
It's so
and,
funny.
So I tend to kind of obsess in spurts on lots of different things. I spent a bunch of time trading foreign currency. And I really got obsessed with those markets. And then I'm sitting in Nepal across from the dinner table with a guy who specializes in that. He's like, "You're kidding. I've never met a pastor who knows how to trade currencies," right? So it's just, I tend to dabble at lots and lots of things, and it's given me the opportunity to share the gospel or engage with lots and lots of different kinds of people. So if you're that person, use it, not just to satisfy your curiosity. Use it to lead people to Jesus, to engage common ground. If you're a specialist like Kevin, then use that specialty. And the whole thing is about reaching people for Jesus. It's finding common ground.
That's great.
That's what it is. Okay, so now we need to get to running the race because that's like the cool part of this
That's
passage.
run, Forrest, run.
Yeah.
So he says, so think about all the marathons. I just met somebody just yesterday. In fact, I commented on their Instagram because they ran a half marathon. Yeah. So people.
Why? Why? They start at the parking lot and they run in a circle and come back to the parking lot. They could have just stayed in the parking lot.
Right. So they ran a half marathon.
I haven't figured that out yet.
I know, me neither. But they run 13.1 miles. But the point is that he's comparing it to the drive of people, competitively racing, not just racing against themselves and against the clock, but actually running for a medal for first place. And he says, well, you enter a competition to win. And he said, so run to win. Yeah. And he says, but don't run to win a medal that you hang around your neck that's going to fade away and that you're going to leave in earth.
It just doesn't matter.
It's going to fade to dust eventually. It doesn't matter. He says, run, because our prize is an eternal prize. Right. So in other words, what he's saying is, if you're going to, make any headway for Christ and you're in this thing, for eternal rewards, and eternal benefit, not just our rewards for our benefit, but eternal benefit for them and for God, then he says, run to win.
Yeah.
And so, any person who is wired this way or built this way, anybody listening online that is owning their own business or starting their own business, the entrepreneurs, people who get up in the morning and just go and get it, they understand this concept more than anybody.
Right.
And so Paul is saying, live your life spiritually for that. Don't just run to get money or to get, a marathon reward that's going to fade away.
No.
Spend your life getting a prize that matters in eternity.
That's right. And for some people, you and me, it's all day, every day. Hopefully, we're working for changed lives. And that matters. And that's a really easy one to measure, going, wow, that matters. What we do matters. Maybe we're not getting super rich at it, but it matters. For a business person who's a godly person and, they own a shoe company, they might say, well, how do shoes matter? Shoes don't matter. Well, your ability to build wealth, your ability to help fund ministry, your ability to develop leadership skills in the workplace that transfer into being able to provide leadership on a nonprofit board or leadership in a church or whatever. Those things translate. So skill sets that you learn and develop and leverage in the marketplace can be used in the kingdom on a level that, many times pastors, we're good at. We know theology, we usually can communicate, we can share the gospel, we can provide some pastoral care, but a lot of times organizations are deficient if they're only run by pastors. Sometimes they're deficient from the skill sets of business.
I would say most of the time.
Yeah. And same thing with resources, right?
Right.
Leverage resources, make money to give money.
And by the way, you don't have to be an owner or the leader of your organization, because there are workers in an organization that have just as much skill.
Right.
And so everybody has something to offer.
That's right.
And you can leverage your gifts and your experience and your heart and your passion and everything else for the kingdom in some way.
That's right.
And so that's really great.
So it takes discipline. Is how he ends. So I discipline my body. In the King James, he's saying, I beat my body. The word he uses is buffet. Buffet. I buffet my body daily is what he says. But I used to think it said buffet. I buffet my body, because buffet and buffet are the same. So I buffet my body daily.
Yeah, that's funny. Well, I think that's a good place to end. And so we will see you next time on The Bible Guys.